Are you looking at an online ordinary secondary school that can teach you to master chemistry, biology, physics, and basic mathematics? Or are you looking at a quality teacher, so just you call a gifted teacher who can teach you to understand and apply basic mathematics, physics, chemistry, and biology? Those might be some of the questions that you're asking yourself, and including even other questions that I didn't mention yet. So I would like to tell you in advance that stay tuned, you might get the answers of some of the questions concerning about your educational life. How are you, every international and national viewer? I'm very happy to have you. This is Olenjolaim, Moko TAYAI Losingo. Simply just call me Olenjolaim. I thank God by His own grace I'm a Tanzanian, and this is our national flag that always I remember and signifies the necessity of my country in the life of today. So I thank God by His own grace. He has built in me a gift of teaching, so I'm going to teach you about chemistry. But I thank God also by His own grace, He has built in me a true love on chemistry from the Form 1 to Form 6, since I majored in the subject of chemistry during my primary education. So I'm going to teach you what I know about chemistry for the Form 2. Again, another question that may be having in your mind. These programs is well dedicated to homework. Well, these programs would like to dedicate to all ordinary secondary students from Form 1 to Form 4, and even diploma students or reciters, including QT students. So it can accommodate millions of students who are in middle school, or just we call it in ordinary secondary school. Again, another question might be going on in your mind. What are we doing? Why do you need Tanzania online ordinary secondary school in your life? Why do you need TOSO in abbreviation? So this is the vision that we have. According to the book of Proverbs, chapter 29, verse 18, it states that where there's no vision, people perish. What does that phrase mean? Vision, it means that it's the inner picture. It's a revelations. Vision is a revelations of deity, of the picture of God's purpose in the mind of a mankind. So this is the vision we have in Tanzania Ordinary Secondary School in square bracket Olenjolaim. We have an assignment to teach, train, incubate some ordinary secondary students on how they can extract knowledge, understanding, wisdom from the classroom instructions, and combine with knowledge, understanding, and wisdom that you are going to teach them to extract it from the Word of God written in the Holy Bible in order to solve real life problems. So the main objective of the also is to teach our students to think outside the box and how can apply the classroom instructions to solve small-scale real-life problems. So again, I would like to share with you a few informations that can give you an entrance or give you an access. If it's your first time, then join me right now with a little introductions that I'm going to make. If it's your second time, third times, or you're permanent students of the also, then you can skip this part and jump into the session 5 of Oxygen that I've prepared today for you. So let us navigate. Secondly, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all our national and international students of ordinary secondary education, secondary level, into our Tanzania Online Ordinary Secondary School in square bracket Olenjolaim. Simultaneously, I would like to welcome you into one of our official YouTube channel that's called Tanzania Online O-Level Secondary School in square bracket Olenjolaim. What are we doing in this channel? What are we doing in our official YouTube channel? What are we doing in this online secondary school? We are teaching, we are training, we are incubating, we are mentoring, we are changing the life of students from Form 1 to Form 5, from Form 1 to Form 4. As the name indicates, we are going to share with you, or we are going to teach you all about ordinary secondary education subjects. Whether you are national, international students, you're warmly welcome. However, that I'll be using the syllabus of United Republic of Tanzania that's called the chemistry syllabus for ordinary secondary education from 1 to Form 4. But the contents that we are going to cover are cross-cutting concepts or are required by millions of students around the world. We have so many departments. One of the departments in also, it is called the chemistry, and then the subject of the day is called the chemistry. So we'd like to dedicate these contents to all the pre-Form 2 students, all the Form 2 students, all the qualifying test students, QT students, all the grade 10 students, all the reciters who are reciting the Form 2 exams or Form 4 exam, and all the teachers who are teaching chemistry in even some other science subject. This, we are teaching you chapter 1 of the chemistry Form 2, that's called oxygen, and this is session 5, it's called properties and uses of oxygen. So join me in this program in order for you to enjoy the beauty of chemistry for Form 2. Lastly, before we start today's session, before we start in session 5, I would like to spend a few minutes to navigate with you about the few steps that you have to follow to register yourself to also. The first step, we ask you to create a new email, a Yahoo or a Gmail. The second step, we ask you to sign in YouTube by using the email you've created. You have an email, then skip the first step. If you don't have, then we ask you to create it because you need to sign in YouTube. You cannot sign in YouTube without an official email. The third step, we ask you to search to also in YouTube platform. To also is not there, but to also is abbreviations of Tanzania Online Ordinary Secondary School in square bracket OLENJOLAI. So these are the abbreviations. Don't search abbreviations. What should you search? Search this YouTube name, YouTube channel name that's called the Tanzania Online or Level Secondary School in square bracket OLENJOLAI. Once you search it, you will see a round button with the Tanzania national flag, and beside it has been written Tanzania Online or Level Secondary School in square bracket OLENJOLAI. So click that Tanzania national flag. Once you click it, then you're already in our also school. So when you're in our also school, you will see a horizontal text at the top that written homes, videos, playlist, community, channel, and about. So I will come back later into this part or into this toolbar, horizontal toolbar, which is very important. So then, in order for you to register yourself, we ask you to click on subscribe for registration now. The way that you are not yet registered, we ask you to click the button so you can subscribe. And then once you click it, the text will change from subscribe into subscribe. And once the text written subscribe, then the icon of the bell will appear. So click this icon of the bell. You'll be given 3 options and you choose the options of all. So from there, you have already registered yourself permanently, and we don't have a terms registrations or every year registrations. That is lifetime registration, and it's free. There's no registration fee. So now, in case we add any new video of chapter 2, for example, of hydrogens, or for other topics, for example, atomic structure, chemical, just it means that is some other topics of Form 2, for example, water, etc. Then you'll get notifications when you'll be online. We ask you to be an active online student. We are providing contents every day. So at least in a day, we upload or we publish 1 video. So stay tuned and you have to make sure to visit our channel. So the 6th step, we ask you to click the playlist. So you have to come back into this place, click this playlist, and then search your playlist written oxygen or chemistry for the Form 2. In this playlist of oxygen, we have collected all the sessions from session 0, session 1, session 2, session 3, session 4, and session 5 or 14 of oxygen. So you'll find these sessions have been arranged consecutively, it means in ascending order, from the first session to the last session. So that the advantage for you to search what you are looking for or to search a particular topic by clicking the playlist. So if we'll be teaching you hydrogen, then we create a playlist called hydrogen. So you go to the playlist and then you set the playlist written hydrogen, where you find the collections of all related videos about hydrogen. The last step, we ask you to click the share icon to share this video link to other students via social media. Example, Facebook, WhatsApp, email, Telegram, Instagram, etc., etc. So right now, if you've done those steps, you have already registered, we ask you now to share this information with other students so that millions of students will benefit on this program. I believe you are ready. I believe you're a serious student. It's a time right now to go inside what we've prepared for you. You can take your exercise book, your pen, and have a fresh mindset in order to get inside what we are supposed to cover today. So this is session 5, ladies and gentlemen. It has been titled as properties and properties and uses of oxygen. So let me do the quick review of what we have covered in session 4. Then we are going to start our today's session. So quick review of what? Quick review of session 4. So in session 4, we taught you a concept that called the laboratory preparations of oxygen gas by semi-decomposition of potassium chlorate. So it means that the session is called the laboratory preparation of what? Of oxygen gas by semo. It means presence of it is semo-decomposition. Semo-decomposition of what? Of potassium chlorate. Semo-decompositions of potassium chlorate. So we taught you different concepts. We talked about reactants of this reaction. What are the reactants of this reaction? So reactant for this reaction is what? Potassium chlorate itself. Then we talked about what? Catalyst for this reaction. So we told you the catalyst for semi-decompositions of what? Of potassium chlorate. The catalyst is manganese 4 oxide. Then we told you about the condition for this reaction to take place. Then we told you that the condition necessary for this reaction to take place is heat or semo. Is heat or semo energy. Then we told you about what? Products of the chemical reaction. So products, we have 2 products, potassium chloride and oxygen. So we told you about products for that reaction are 2. Oxygen gas and potassium chloride. So potassium chloride. Okay. Then we told you about what? About what chemical equation of the reaction. So we talked about what the chemical equations. So we have reactants, we have catalyst here, we have condition, then we have product. Okay, so we have also molecular chemical equation. We have also, I've talked you about the apparatus required to prepare oxygen in laboratory. Then I talked about materials required in laboratory preparations of oxygen by semi-decomposition of potassium chlorate. Then finally, I drew the diagrams of laboratory preparations of oxygen by semi-decomposition of potassium chlorate. So just to remind you, we say it in chemical, or we call it molecular chemical equation of this preparation. We say it's potassium chlorate, and the presence of what? Of catalyst, which is manganese 4 oxide. Manganese 4 oxide and the presence of heat. Then this will form what? 2 atoms of chlorine plus what? So 2 atoms of chlorine plus oxygen gas. So how many atoms of oxygen gas? 2 atoms of oxygen gas. Now 1 atom of oxygen gas. So we balance it here. We have 16 atoms of oxygen gas. So here we have 3. Yeah, so this is a molecular chemical equations of preparations of oxygen by thermodecompositions of what? Of potassium chloride. Are you ready for the today's session? Are you ready for that? Are you ready to learn about properties of oxygen? So let us start with the first part, titled as what? Properties of oxygen. Properties of oxygen. So we say that oxygen, has both physical, and chemical properties. So oxygen has both physical and chemical properties. Oxygen has both physical and chemical properties. So you can have a question here. Example, mention at least 4 physical properties of physical. Mention at least 4 physical properties of oxygen gas. That's the question we have. Mention at least 4 physical properties of oxygen gas. So from this fact now, we can have what? Command H. Physical properties. Remember, physical properties talks about the state properties, whether it is liquid state or gaseous state. Physical properties. Physical properties of oxygen. So physical properties of oxygen. So we are dealing with physical properties of what? Of oxygen. The following, we are answering this question, so this is solution. I will teach you more than 4 physical properties of oxygen as an advantage. The following are some of physical properties of oxygen gas or oxygen atom. The first physical property of oxygen, it is slightly soluble in water. So you say oxygen, so about solubility, is also a physical property. Oxygen is slightly soluble. Oxygen is slightly soluble in water. So oxygen can dissolve in water, but slightly, so less. So it's not a pure soluble. This oxygen is not it's not a highly soluble gas in water. Highly soluble gas. Oxygen is not a slightly high soluble gas in water. Oxygen is slightly soluble in water. That's the first physical property. So I prepared 8. Second physical property, you can pause the video and try to mention. Physical properties of a substance talks about molecular, talks about boiling point, it talks about freezing point, talks about solubility, etc., etc. So the second property said that oxygen is about 1.1 times denser than air. The density of air density of oxygen the density of oxygen is about 1.1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times density the density of oxygen is about 1.1 times density of what? Density of air. The density of oxygen is about 1.1 times density of air. So it means oxygen is denser than air, that's the meaning. So 1.1 times density of air. So an experiment has been done in this physical property. Then we go to the third physical property. Oxygen has a melting point of negative 218 degrees Celsius. So oxygen has has melting. Oxygen has melting point of negative Oxygen is melting point of negative 218. Oxygen is melting point of negative 218 degrees centigrade. This is the melting point of oxygen. It's very small. What is melting point? What is melting reaction? How to counter check the response. So oxygen has melting point of negative 218 degrees centigrade. the first physical property, we say that oxygen has a boiling point Oxygen has a boiling point of 183 degrees centigrade. If you say physical properties for oxygen, oxygen is colorless. Oxygen is colorless. Oxygen is colorless. Oxygen is a colorless gas. Oxygen is a colorless gas. The sixth physical property, oxygen is odorless gas. Oxygen is odorless gas. Oxygen is odorless gas. Another property, physical property of oxygen, oxygen is tasteless. Does not have any taste. It's a tasteless gas. Oxygen is tasteless gas. Does not have any taste. Number 8. So say oxygen is neutral litmus. So oxygen is neutral what? Is neutral litmus. So these are the 7 physical properties of oxygen. These are 7 physical properties of oxygen. Stay thinking, go through each physical property until you grasp the concept. So let me just explain. The first physical property state that oxygen is slightly soluble in water. Mean that when oxygen dissolves in water, it establishes a reversible reaction. So that's why that we prefer to use here. The second use of oxygen, or the second physical property of oxygen, is this one. The density of oxygen is about 1.1 times density of air. Times density of 40, density of air. Then the third one. Oxygen has melting point of negative 218. So say the density of oxygen is about 1.1 times the density of air. And then again, we say that oxygen has a melting point of negative 218. Oxygen has a melting point of negative 218 degrees centigrade. That's the melting point. If you want it to melt the oxygen, then you have to heat up to that level. Number 4, oxygen has a boiling point of negative 183 degrees centigrade. Okay, so oxygen has a boiling point of negative 183. So this is the physical property of oxygen. Oxygen, regardless of how I know it, it has a boiling point of negative 183 degrees centigrade. So that is that is the boiling point of alkane. Again, alkane. Again, oxygen is colorless gas. Oxygen is a colorless gas. What does it mean? Because oxygen has a color, but when something is being introduced, then the color will be omitted. So another sentence is oxygen odorless gas. Oxygen is tasteless. Oxygen is what? Is tasteless. Yes, tasteless. Tasteless. So oxygen does not have any taste like salty, like other gaseous gases. But another physical property, oxygen have a neutral color, have no any color when the litmus is introduced into it. So these are the physical properties. Every oxygen molecule or atom contains all of this property. It means oxygen is slightly soluble in water. Oxygen is denser than 1.1 times density of air. Oxygen is a melting point of negative 218. Oxygen has a boiling point of negative 183. Oxygen is colorless gas. Oxygen is odorless gas. Oxygen is tasteless. Okay? Then the 6th one, you say oxygen is odorless gas. The 7th one is called the oxygen is a tasteless gas. Oxygen is a so oxygen is tasteless gas, so it does not have any taste if you put in the mouth, where that we have taste or the tasty sensors. And then oxygen is neutral litmus, means that this is the color, one of the color, when a substance is burned. So ladies and gentlemen, keep meditating about these physical properties of oxygen while you are getting prepared to enjoy chemical properties of chemical properties of oxygen, and later on we'll be teaching you about the uses of properties and the uses of chemical reactions of So I will teach about the uses of oxygen. Alright? So stay tuned. Okay, so my dear students, I would like just quickly to review these physical properties of oxygen. And excuse me, sometimes I've been confusing oxygens with some other organic compounds. So the following are the sum of the physical properties of oxygen gas. Oxygen is slightly soluble in water. That the first physical property means that if we take oxygen and just dissolve it in water, it will be soluble slightly. Then the density of oxygen, so the density, this is talking about density, which is mass per unit volume, is about 1.1 times the density of air. 1.1 times density of 40. So the density of oxygen, so this means that density of oxygen, this is equal to 1.1 times density of 40 of air. So which one is large? So density of air is, so air it is denser than oxygen. So it means that the density is less, no, oxygen is less denser than air by such kind, by multiples of a number of 1.1. The same physical property, we say that oxygen has melting point of negative 218 degrees centigrade. This is a very small boiling point of the gas. Again, because we are talking about physical properties, we have talking about boiling point of oxygen. The boiling point of oxygen is negative 183 degrees centigrade. Then you have again, oxygen is a colorless gas. So oxygen does not have color. Oxygen is not blue. Oxygen is not red. It is not red. It's not red in color. Oxygen is not white. So oxygen is not green. Oxygen is not yellow. Oxygen is not brown. Oxygen is not orange. So oxygen, it's a colorless gas. Say colorless gas. It does not have any color. That's the meanings of less. That's the meanings of these terminations of less. So oxygen, it's a colorless gas. That's a physical property. Some of the gases, they have a color. But oxygen is what? Colorless gas. The sixth physical property, oxygen is an odorless gas. Odorless what? Odorless gas. So it means oxygen does not have smell. So oxygen does not have smell. So it means that you cannot have odor of what? Of oxygen. Again, another physical property is oxygen is tasteless. So oxygen is tasteless. Yes? So oxygen does not have any taste. So if you have oxygen container, then you open and test it, it does not have a taste like maybe table salt. The last physical properties, oxygen oxygen has a neutral change when it is introduced to the litmus paper. So that's how we have written oxygen is neutral litmus. So if that's the case, right now, let us continue. If you have any question about physical properties of oxygen, don't hesitate asking your question in the comment section of this video. So look the comment section, ask any question about the physical properties of oxygen. So let me teach you the second part of this session, of session 5, which is chemical properties. Chemical properties. Chemical properties of what? Chemical properties of oxygen. Chemical properties of oxygen. So we'd like to learn what are the chemical properties of oxygen. Does oxygen react with some other elements or some other compounds, and then so it will be the end product. Okay? So briefly, we like to say that so we can start with this general sentence. We say that oxygen has many chemical properties. Many chemical properties. So you say these are some of chemical properties. Some of chemical properties. Some of chemical properties of oxygen gas. Of oxygen. The first chemical property, you say oxygen is a very oxidizing agent. Oxygen is a very oxidizing agent. Oxygen is a very good oxidizing agent. So oxide is a very good oxidizing agent that we use in chemistry. So it may be used as oxidizing agent when we need to oxidize a particular compound. So that's the first physical property. Right now, as a Form 2 student, you don't know yet what the means of oxidation and reduction. We'll teach you later. But oxidizing agent is the chemical substance that we use to oxidize chemical substances. And reducing agent is the chemical substance that we use to reduce. So oxidation means we increase the oxidation state, or it means oxidation is actually the additions of oxygen, reduction is the additions of hydrogen. So those are the simple meaning of oxidation and reduction. So oxidizing agent, it can oxidize. So oxygen can oxidize some other compounds in chemistry. The second chemical property, we say that oxygen gas supports what? Oxygen gas supports what? Combustion. So combustion as a chemical reaction, combustion chemical reaction. So combustion means burning. Okay? So you say oxygen supports combustion chemical reaction. Oxygen supports combustion chemical reaction. What the means of combustion? So combustion simply is the burning of the substance. For example, we can have combustion reaction of alkane. Okay, combustion reactions of alkane. So it means that the oxygen is used in combustion reactions. So oxygen is used to support combustion reaction in most cases. Example, can have methane undergo combustion reaction. This forms carbon dioxide and water. Dioxide and water. So if you balance with how many? So with 4 hydrogen atom, 2 oxygen, so you have 4 oxygen atom, and this one. So this is the example of combustion. So here oxygen has been used as a molecule that supports combustion of methane. So that's the second chemical property. The third chemical property of oxygen is oxygen reacts with metals to form basic oxides. So the third chemical reactions of oxygen. So oxygen reacts with metals. So oxygen reacts with metals to form basic oxide. From basic oxides. So example, oxygen reacting with metals to form basic oxide. So for example, potassium metal can react with oxygen to form what? To form potassium oxide. So potassium oxide. So to form potassium oxide here, we are going to have 2 atoms of potassium. And then we can double this one. So you have 2 options. So we can right here I have this, or we can double the number of oxygen here. While here we have what? We have 4. So we have 4 atoms of potassium. We have 2 atoms of oxygen. We have 4 atoms of potassium and 2 atoms of oxygen. So this is the example of chemical reaction between metal and oxygen to form basic oxide. So again, magnesium metal can react with oxygen to form what? magnesium oxide. Magnesium oxide. So you can have 2 atoms here, and here you have 2 atoms of what? Of magnesium. Okay? So this is basically oxide. So what the names of this one? It is called the potassium oxide, which is basic oxide, can react with an acid. And the name of this one is called the magnesium oxide, etc., etc., etc. The first chemical properties of oxygen is oxygen reacts with nonmetals to form acidic oxides. Oxygen reacts with nonmetal. In the third property, oxygen reacts with metal. But here, oxygen reacts with nonmetal to form what? To form acidic oxide. So oxygen reacts with nonmetal to form acidic oxide. So to form acidic oxide. Example of this acidic oxide, just let me use another style, nitrogen dioxide. This is an acidic oxide. But the other one is sulfur dioxide, etc., etc. So nitrogen dioxide is formed by a nonmetal called the nitrogen and oxygen. So it's salty acidic oxide, means it can react with base to form salt. Then sulfur dioxide is formed by a nonmetal called the sulfur and the oxygen. So that is another chemical property of oxygen. The fifth chemical property of oxygen is called that oxygen relights a glowing splint. This is the test of oxygen. Oxygen relights a glowing splint. It means oxygen supports fire. So this is the chemical property. Oxygen relights what? So oxygen relights a glowing splint. A glowing splint. In other words, oxygen supports fire, while carbon dioxide puts it off. So oxygen relights a glowing what? A glowing splint. Means that oxygen supports what? Means that oxygen supports what? Supports fire. Then the sixth chemical property of oxygen. Oxygen has no action on calcium hydroxide. Oxygen has no action on calcium hydroxide. On calcium hydroxide. Oxygen has no action on calcium hydroxide. What does it mean? It means if you have calcium hydroxide plus oxygen, the answer is what? No reaction. That's the meaning of that sentence. No reaction between oxygen and calcium hydroxide. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the 6 chemical properties of what? Of oxygen. The first one, we say oxygen is a very good oxidizing agent. So it's used to oxidize some chemical reaction. Second, oxygen supports combustions on the chemical reaction. So oxygen supports combustion chemical reaction. Example, a reaction between methane and oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water. Then here we are, okay, then this is the balanced chemical equation. The steady chemical property of oxygen, oxygen reacts with metals to form basic oxide. This is the key word. Oxygen reacts with what? With metal to form basic oxides. And I gave you two examples of chemical reactions to show this steady chemical property of oxygen. So we have 4 atoms of potassium can react with oxygen molecule to form 2 atoms of potassium oxide, which is what? Which is basic oxides. The first chemical property of oxygen, oxygen reacts with non-metal. Reacts with non-metals. So here oxygen reacts with non-metals to form what? To form acidic oxide. Example, nitrogen dioxide, sodium hydroxide. No, sulfur dioxide. Nitrogen oxide, or nitrogen, this is called nitrogen dioxide. It's example of acidic oxide. And this is called sulfur dioxide. It's example of what? Of acidic oxide. So this is formed by reactions between non-metal, which is non-metal atom, which is nitrogen and oxygen. And this the non-metal react with oxygen atom, oxygen molecule, yeah. The fifth chemical property of oxygen, we say oxygen relights a glowing splint. So it means oxygen relights a glowing splint. So it means that it's supporting fire. While carbon dioxide puts fire off, or does not support fire. Oxygen has no actions on calcium hydroxide. Oxygen cannot react with calcium hydroxide. So ladies and gentlemen, that is all about chemical properties of oxygen. You can ask any question, or you can learn some other chemical properties of oxygen, but what I have taught you is enough according to your syllabus. So ladies and gentlemen, let me take you right now into the chemical test of oxygen. And then we'll check one question. Chemical test of what? Chemical test of oxygen. How do you test the oxygen in laboratory? Chemical testing of what? Of oxygen, glowing splint. Chemical test of oxygen. I'd like to say that this is all about glowing splint. Chemical testing of oxygen, or glowing splint. Glowing splint. So before we explain or we teach you how you can test the oxygen in laboratory, we have a question, which is the example, and we ask you to refer certificate secondary education examination, which in short in Tanzania we call it NECTA. NECTA for the Form 2. It was question number Form 2 of 2004. Question number, it was question number 4. Question number 4. Number 4B, because there are 4A, 4B, and 4C. Number 4B. So the question says, briefly explain how you will distinguish ordinary air from pure oxygen. Briefly distinguish, briefly explain how you will distinguish how you will distinguish ordinary air from pure oxygen. From ordinary oxygen. So briefly explain how you will distinguish ordinary air from the ordinary oxygen. How you can distinguish air from oxygen. So this will be the response for that question. The chemical test of oxygen is it relights a glowing wooden splint. Take the glowing splint and place it in the sample of oxygen gas. If it ignites, the gas is oxygen. So you say that oxygen gas can be tested in laboratory to blow the splint. So oxygen gas can be tested in laboratory to what? So oxygen gas can be tested in laboratory to blow the splint. How? This is the way. The chemical testing of what? The chemical test of oxygen is chemical testing of oxygen is it relights a glowing wooden splint. It relights glowing wooden splint. It lights a glowing wooden splint. It lights a glowing wooden splint. So the chemical test of oxygen is it relights a glowing wooden splint. That's how we test oxygen. Simply, we used to test if the gas jar contains oxygen by taking a glowing splint and put it in, or by taking what? A wooden splint and put it in the gas jar of oxygen. If the glowing splint is still glowing, or the wooden splint is still glowing, then the gas is what? Is oxygen. So we say again that